Hey, welcome to Ditch Digger CEO. We're here today. My buddy Chris and I have an amazing guy that is going to really change the way you think about data, in my opinion. I mean, I know that data in my world has meant a lot, and sometimes we don't value it as much as we should. Satyen Sangani, I say that right, Satyen?
Satyen, but all good. And thank you for having me.
Satyen. Satyen. Okay, Sangani, right?
That's right.
All right, perfect. So welcome to Ditch Digger CEO. We're really excited to talk to you. You built an amazing business and technology that so many people would value to have you on their team to be able to help them. But when I think about people that are new in the technology world, or young people that are diving into technology or thinking about being an entrepreneur, your story is a great one to add to our list of Ditch Digger CEO. So we're excited to get going here, Satyan. You got some, awards recently. We see, we've been part of the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year awards, and not easy to be part of that unless you've had some excessive growth and success. Congratulations on that. And a bunch of other things here, but let's get into you and who you are first. Maybe just summarize kind of your business and what your business, what the problems or the solutions you guys provide. And then we'll talk more about you personally, who you are and what drives you.
Sure. So I'm the CEO and the founder of this company called Alation. Alation was founded in 2012 by myself and three other co-founders, two engineers who had PhDs and came out of Google, and then a designer who also had a linguistics background that came out of Apple. And so the four of us got together. We had an idea. The idea was that data basically was really hard to understand by most people, and that you, to understand it, had to basically have a lot of information that wasn't a part of the system that stored the data. Well, like you have a system that stores card transactions. Where did those transactions come from? Who engineered that data? How do you know the data is right? What does transaction date in that even mean? Those are questions that people have, but they couldn't easily answer. And so what we did is we founded this company, Alation. And what Alation does is it essentially helps people understand their data. We call it a data intelligence platform. And our first product was a catalog for data, just like Sears Roebuck had a catalog for merchandise. But the basic premise behind it is, look, data is a really useful way to understand the world around us, but it's kind of complex and kind of hard and kind of technical, and most people don't understand it. And so what we do is we help companies and people understand their data better, find their data, because a lot of these companies have literally millions of databases and very little ability to understand what's inside of them. And by doing that, we help companies innovate and build new products. And we have so many stories where we've had so many customers build and innovate based upon the insights that they've been able to find through Alation. So that's roughly what we do. We have 40% of the Fortune 100 as our customers like Pfizer and Cisco and American Family Insurance. And so it's a really great and august group of customers worldwide. We operate in 36 countries, and it's just been an amazing journey to be on.
Unbelievable. And where'd you get your start in technology? Let's talk about like the education you have and where this passion came from.
So it's interesting. Some of the one of the interesting compliments that I often get is people say, "Oh, you're as a technical founder, you obviously knew how to go build this really complicated data company." And what's super interesting is I have literally no technology training academically. I started in school as an economist, which, I mean, depending on who you ask, it could be the most useless profession or area of study, although I think it was pretty useful. And then did my master's in economics. And so, I learned everything that I knew on the job. My first job was actually on Wall Street, but I didn't just like analyzing things. I wanted to really build stuff. And so then my second or third job, actually really third job, was in a technology company that a friend started. And he sort of said, "Well, you kind of don't like this Wall Street thing. Why don't you try this?" And so I did, and I had no idea what I was doing, and made a sort of a pig's breakfast of this. And this is, by the way, back in the .com day when like everybody thought they were going to be a billionaire just by breathing technology. We basically, I built I started as a biz dev guy. I went to start building some product, then thought I was going to be an academic and went back and did my master's degree, and then came back around and, went to a company called, what actually ended up happening is I finished my master's degree, thought I was going to get a PhD, but my wife was in Los Angeles and I had just met her as I was leaving to go study in England. So I came back because, I liked her more than I liked doing the academic thing. Um, and what I found was that the only job I could get was at Oracle. And I thought I was going to be there for 9 weeks, and I was there for 9 years, and I learned a ton about technology. And it's what gave me the idea to start this company.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, you went to a little school there in Great Britain. What was it called?
Oxford.
Oxford.
University
I've
of
heard of
Oxford.
that school. Yeah, it's kind of a junior college kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
something like that.
yeah,
Uh,
that's a great school. That's awesome. And you say the economics degree. I mean, people know I barely made it through high school, but something I studied eventually in business when I'm around doing business was read a lot of about Art Laffer and some great economists in our country's history. Art Laffer is a friend of mine today, and when I ran for governor, it was going to be him and one of his mentees, Steve Moore, were going to be my economic advisors as governor of the state of Illinois, because I really believe that great economics solves great problems, whether it be in business, government, heck, in family, right? I mean, when it comes to running your family. So again, I think you can learn so much if you study the best economists that we see. Great countries, great states, great families, and great businesses all have been run with usually some type of economic 101, right? And I think if you got a great economic mind, you're going to be able to do a lot of things in your life that you can't do if you don't understand the numbers
I
and the demand, right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, so like you, I have this podcast. It's called Data Radicals, and it's about how companies and organizations use data. What I bring to that podcast is sort of this like economics view, which is like, okay, well, what are the reasons that people would need data, and how do we supply data better? And so you think about that as an economics problem. One of my first guests was a guy named David Epstein, and David wrote a book called Range, which was a New York Times bestseller. And David also was like a journalist for sports. And one of the things he said, and interestingly observed in the books, and his basic thesis was like, it's better to be a generalist than a specialist, because you can basically relate different concepts. And he said, a lot of what people study in college often is forgotten, and most subjects actually have a very short-lived applicability to their professional lives. The one exception to that was economics. And the reason why is because economics teaches you to think. Like, it teaches you how to basically break down a problem and how to think about why things are happening in the world. And that's always been true for me. Like, as I, in everything that I do, whether it's making a product decision or deciding where to go to market, or how to hire, or how to think about a process internally, economics informs so much of how I think about the world and how I act and what I do, because it just helps me frame decisions in a way that makes sense to me and hopefully other people.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about America and the free market system, right? I mean, the reason that we've had more innovation than anywhere else in the world over the last 100 years, I think, is because of the free market system. It's pretty simple, right? If you're inspired to want to reach financial goals or life goals, whatever, it's a lot easier with money, of course. And if you have the ability to reach those goals, because the free market system allows you to innovate and create and build something to serve many, and be rewarded for that, it's a pretty cool thing, and it works. You look at other countries that are communist countries, or they have all these limitations, and big government just runs everything. It doesn't work so well. And innovation, I believe the innovation of our country is much due to this free market system that we've been so blessed to be part of.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, I do think that there are places where markets break down, but I think they're smaller and fewer than many people expect. And I think a lot of time, look, like whether you're on the left or you're the right, like everybody wants to try, like everybody's a view and a vision for how to make the world a better place. And most people are trying to make the world a better place. And I think the market is something that is mostly right. And, in some cases needs correction, but I think in a lot of cases, pretty much does get it right. And it just like, look, we all want to do better, and we all want to, and ambitious people want to innovate and want to make their lives better and their families' lives better. That's true for me. That's probably true for you. It's true for most people that are trying to do something. And I think the capitalist system gives people that capability. Does it have flaws? Sure, but I think it's certainly better than any other system that's out there. And it's just a great thing to be a part of. And as an American, it's something that I'm, like you, super proud of.
Yes, I mean, again, I love our free market system, and I'll continue to do where they can to fight to keep it there. And, whether it's just fighting bad regulation that hurts small business or whatever we have to do. And again, when we go back to the concept of great business, you've done something that a few people have figured out, but not many, right? And that's solving problems in a business that many people understand. There's data you have to mine, right? But I don't know anybody that's built a business serving, I'm sure maybe a couple of competitors, but top 100, top Fortune 100, 40% of top Fortune 500 companies and solving their problems for them. So you figured out how to solve big problems for the biggest customers in the world, and good things happen. But if you weren't willing to serve at the highest level and really bust your butt to serve well, you wouldn't have what you got. And it's really fun to watch success when you're just passionate about something and you work your butt off every day to solve problems for your customers. Customers see that and more want you on their team. So really cool. I want you to talk to my son, as we said before this show started, because I think we've got so many other ways to harvest great data in our technology company, and you'd be an amazing friend to have to either do business with you or just bounce things off you. So we're gonna do that. When you think of data harvesting, it's just not like the big the Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies that need it. Think about the small business. Where do you see small businesses thinking a little more progressively when it comes to harvesting data in a small business?
So, I mean, let's take any example. So let's say you're a Subway shop owner, and what you're trying to do is figure out how to, and you've got basically, let's say, two problems. One of your problems is you can't really figure out how to retain the right employees because you're basically paying minimum wage or something close to it, and so turnover is really high. And maybe the second problem is you're just trying to figure out how to push the most profitable product because effectively you're pushing out sandwiches, and you might have some sandwiches that are a little bit higher margin than others. And so, ultimately that becomes, in many ways a data problem. Like, where do you, first question, where do you locate your business? Like, where is it a place that's going to be convenient and applicable to, and accessible to the employees that you've got? Now, you don't necessarily, when you're starting that business, think about it as a data problem, but you can look at foot traffic data. You can look at understanding what types of people come in and out. You can look at where the people, I love apparently my own comment here there with Zoom comments, but like, you can do a lot of things that allow you to understand where the best place to put this business is. And then, as you think about what are the things that you can do to attract those employees, like, well, what benefits can you offer? And even if it's non-paid benefits, what shift work can you offer so that those employees are, finding the most convenient hours? I mean, those are all data problems of sorts. And as you interview, if you become an observer of the world and you start marking what people's preferences are and what types of sandwiches they want to buy and what campaigns they respond to, then those are things in turn that can allow you to build and market and build a better product. Now, we don't think of that as data because we think of that as stuff that we just observe about the world. But even as a small business owner, what you're really trying to do is observe trends, because you've got to market and you've got to put your best foot forward and invest behind the most useful things and stop investing behind the things that don't work. And the best people to do that are people that are, really good, astute observers of the world around them and see what's working. And most entrepreneurs are basically, they're trying to find patterns so that they can service them at scale. And the people who find the best patterns are able to build the most scalable businesses. And so, to me, every business is a data business, and every entrepreneur is really looking for data because that's going to help us build better products and better services.
And as you say that, I'm thinking about when I first started understanding the value of data that I could harvest was I read the book, basically all around the 80-20 rule. And, man, I started really going nuts and evaluate everything in that 80-20 process. So that back then, definitely less than 20% of my business was delivering over 80% of my value. Right. And so the challenge is, how do you grow more of that? Right. How do you grow more of that?
Totally.
15 to 20% of those customers that were delivering more than 80% of the value of my businesses. Right. And I think that's why then I first began really looking at data more than ever, just kind of trying to track, what were my profits on this work compared to that work? How do these people pay me in this less than 20% of my business? How do they pay me compared to that? The customers that were 80%, 90% of my business that paid me kind of, lousily, in a bad way. Right. And so, my worst customers would take 90 to 120 days to pay me. My best would be looking for me to give me a check while I started the job, And so how do I find more of those customers? Right. And that was back, a long time ago, but I tell you that 80-20 theory works. And if we continue to evaluate our businesses using great data, with that 80-20 in mind, I think it's, you drive success in a big way, and again, we still use, data more and more because of that same thing. How do we drive the best business, the best valued customers, or, how do we really evaluate year after year? Are we growing with good customers, great customers, or mediocre customers? Because the enterprise value of our businesses are kind of based on that, right?
Well, even asking that question is basically a function of data. I mean, there's this great book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, by this guy, Richard Rummel, and he's like, strategy is exercise of choice, right? You've got to choose one thing, and therefore not choose 20 other things that you can possibly do. And I think your 80-20 rule speaks exactly to that point, which is you got to really focus and ask yourself the question: where am I spending time? Why am I spending time? Where am I spending money? Why am I doing this? And that leads you to really just, the next question will be, well, what does the data tell me? Is it telling me that I should spend time here or there? Is it telling me that I should talk to this set of people or that set of people? And that'll really help you, obviously spend your time in the wisest way. And so, yeah, I'm obviously a huge believer in it, and it's really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do.
Great question to ask consistently, right? What does the data tell me? Oh, let's look. What does the data tell us, right? And then when in going to school, when you were going to school in Oxford, it was were these, when you're looking at the study of economics, what were the messages you got then from an education that told you that this is a great place to be, or was there anything then, or was it just an oracle that you figured out your direction?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I had a real academic awakening when I was at Oxford. So what I studied was basically economics for development. And really the question there was like, okay, well, why isn't it that, or how do we develop, companies in what at that point were, third world countries, or now known as emerging market countries, like India, where my ancestry is from. Why did those countries develop, and what is it about those markets that we can do to sort of change and evolve things? And what you realize is that, and what was interesting is I had always, and have always believed in free markets, and the idea that markets are efficient, that price is clear, and that you can always offer a product and a service. Now, Oxford had a particularly, what I'll call, liberal view of economics, and therefore didn't always believe in the free markets. And I think what I learned there was that there are some cases where markets work. There are some other cases where they need a little bit of help. And one of the interesting things is sometimes interventions are useful, but a lot of times interventions are completely, actually do the exact opposite thing of what they intended to do. And so then you get really nuanced about this stuff, like which interventions work, why did they work, what are cases in which markets are broken, when can you fix them, when can you not fix them? Like we've got a great example in healthcare. Is it a public system? Is it a private system? Like, I don't even know what it is anymore. It's a little hard to discover. I know that insurance companies are optimizing for, kind of profit, as it were. It's not clear to me that the outcomes are very good. How do you think about that entire system, and when do you intervene and when do you not intervene? And I think Oxford gave me a really nuanced view of how to think about markets and when they can work and when they can't work. And even things like, in technology, a lot of things are what you call power laws. Like one one innovation gets a huge amount of the pie. Google right now, obviously, as a search engine, is a monopoly. And is that a good market? Is that a well-functioning market, or is that a badly functioning market? And then, of course, if you're in the business of technology, how do you create things that are highly defensible? So those are some really interesting questions that I think I became a little bit more sophisticated about asking about when I was at Oxford. Um, but the world's a complicated place, and so it just helped me sort of really think about that complexity a little bit better,
Yeah.
and just learn a little bit more.
Yeah. So I mean, and there's such extremes when it comes to what a monopoly is or what differentiation is, right? We all build, if you love business, you love entrepreneurship, you build a business to differentiate from the competition. I always go back to a book called Blue Ocean Strategy I read as a young man. And Blue Ocean Strategy was a simple book, but it just talked about, swimming out to that blue ocean away from the bloody shark infested red ocean of commoditization, right? And if you think that way every day, you're gonna differentiate. You're gonna be if you care about serving your customers better, and you focus on differentiation, you're going to be a strong business probably, right? But then when you're extremely strong in differentiating, right, like a Google, and you grow into this monster company, right? And when are you a monopoly, and when is it kind of unfair to market to the market? I don't know, right? But I like the fact that small businesses, and new innovative minds could work to compete with them. You would think that Xerox was that big monopolized company years ago, right? And nobody's gonna knock them off, but somebody figured out right how to compete and eventually put them out of business. Or Blockbuster Video and so many others that we could look at as, man, that's kind of monopolized, right? And then you look back and say, boy, it really wasn't. Somebody figured out how to knock them off the monopolization throne, right? The throne of monopolization. So again, when I look at politically, some people believe, and we have somebody running for president today that believes that we need cost controls on business, and it's businesses that are creating this inflation. It's greedy. It's those doggone greedy capitalist pigs that are creating this inflation. I'm very confident that that's not the case. I'm very confident that the idea of cost controls on businesses is a stupid idea. But again, that's me being a business guy that's been around for a long time, because I know I compete like hell for every customer I got. And even if I have strong differentiators, I'm still working to serve them well at a very, very reasonable, lean profit. And I think most business minds that want to stay viable, I mean, I look at Walmart. Well, look at Walmart's profits. I mean, they're not making, 20, 30% net profit. And some people think, gosh, they're a monopoly, right? Well, they're a giant for sure. But I think if you got a great value proposition, you could probably start up a store. Many people have Target and many others, a retail store that competes well with them. So again, how do you define that, right? It's a tough thing to think about.
It absolutely is. I mean, I think there are lots of dumb ideas that come out of, politicians, frankly, and a lot of them are, they sound good. Like, oh, well, I don't want to pay good, low, like, I don't want to pay high prices. So like, I'm going to vote for the guy that's going to make low prices, or, like, we should manufacture everything here. Let's not buy anything from there. And, like, these are all like ideas. And, on the face of it, if you don't know much better, that could be a good
Yeah.
thing. But on the other hand, like, they really distort markets, and distortion generally can be really bad. And so, these are, I think and it's funny because there's some cases that look like monopolies where there really aren't. Like Walmart's a great case. Walmart, I mean, would probably tell you, hell, we literally compete with Amazon every second of the day, and every
Yeah.
retailer that's our customer, is super concerned about the market power that an Amazon has and how much they would do in the markets. And so is who's the monopoly here? Is it Walmart? Is it Amazon? Um, it's complicated, but look, I think these are questions that, we all have to answer, and I don't think these are black and white things. And, you kind of have to get nuanced, but I think that we live in a really fun and interesting world where there's a lot of innovation, AI is going to change a ton of stuff, and data is behind all of that. And so to me, like, these are just great questions to be a part of and to be able to ask and to be able to participate in and to feel
I
really
agree.
safe about.
I agree. It's an awesome time to live, right? When we have all all these great things to think about and these opportunities to think about that you wouldn't have had 100 years ago. So we think about, let's go back to your upbringing. How you thought as a kid, and did you think you'd be an entrepreneur someday? Start as a kid in high school, let's say, and your upbringing and your parents, and what that was like.
So dad was a serial entrepreneur. He basically started, so he immigrated from India to the United States in 1958 and went to the University of Rolla in Missouri as his first things. Like, he came over on a boat, went to Missouri. I think it was one of the only Indian dudes there. He talked about how you'd survive off a can of Campbell's soup every single day. And then, went from there, had his first job at Ford, uh, had a whole bunch of jobs through the Midwest, lived in Grand Rapids, lived in Detroit, and then ultimately made his way to California, where he started an electroplating company. What that was basically a company where they would coat sort of metal bumpers or microchips with sort of a metal coating. And, that would be for different reasons. If you put chrome on a bumper, it was just to make it look good. But gold on a microchip, it was to make it more conductive. But he would do that and built a big business, moderately sized. Now would be considered a small business, but, it obviously did well for the family. Then went on to building and buying supermarkets, went and sort of, went into hotels, where we had hotels in South Carolina and up in Washington State, massively overextended himself, lost a ton of money. And I was like, wow, I never want to do this. Like, I never want to be an entrepreneur, because this is like horrible. We made all this money and then we lost all this money, and reputation, in particular, the reputation part was really tough. And so I never thought I wanted to do this. And so shockingly, now I'm here. There's another story about that. But that was my upbringing. My mom worked super hard. My dad worked super hard too. I mean, they were always believing in education. They, like the traditional immigrant dad, they were never super, they never really criticized me, but they certainly had high expectations, and they instilled that I should have high expectations of myself, which I did. And so I worked really hard, but I never thought I really wanted to be an entrepreneur, honestly. So yeah, crazy,
Okay.
crazy stuff, I thought.
And then through college, I mean, do you think you're just going to work for a big technology? What were your goals when you're in college at Oxford, right? I mean, your expectations at Oxford are going to go. You're going to do something big with that education. Not everybody has the opportunity to get that education. What was your vision then, and where did it go?
So I went to school in New York, and then after graduating, I thought all I wanted was security. And so the easiest job that I thought that you'd get security out of was, like, I could go work on Wall Street and go work at an investment bank, which I did do. And so I, worked at a big investment bank, Morgan Stanley at the time. And then, kind of liked the interest. I mean, it was very interesting. It was a very interesting job. Like, you'd work on these big mergers and you'd meet these really like high powered people, and you'd get like surrounded by these, ritzy like meals, and, you'd fly business class and first class. And so that was all great. And yet I didn't find it very rewarding. Like, I was like watching other people do things with their businesses, but I was like, I could probably do a little bit different and better. And so I knew I did it, and I thought it was going to be great. And I obviously paid a lot of money at the time. And, the path to making lots and lots of money was there, which I really wanted, because I wanted security. And yet, then I went to a different job where I worked at a private equity firm, even more money, even more prestige, but again, not super satisfied with what I was doing. And so I was kind of in this place where I was lost, because I was like choosing jobs that got me security, but on the flip side, wasn't really satisfied by them. And so that security, I think, came up from my upbringing, because, my dad was like sort of built this crazy career where there were like lots of ups and downs. On the flip, I wanted security, but then, on the back of, like, somewhere in the back of my mind, I think I also wanted to build something, and hadn't realized it by then.
So that was like 10 years out of school.
That was about actually 4 years out of school. Then I went to Oxford. Then I started up at .com company, where I was for a couple of years. Thought I, was like, screw all of this. I'm just going to go to Oxford and be an academic. And I thought I was going to, at that time thought I was going to do a PhD in economics and be a professor, and an academic. But the day I was leaving for England, I got on the phone with my wife, and she and I spoke on the phone for 12 hours. And she was doing her pediatric residency at the time in Los Angeles. And so, I spent all my time in England, basically shuttling back and forth to LA. Ultimately then said, I'm going to go take a job in Los Angeles. And that's where I started working at Oracle in the tech industry as my second tech job, and really started kind of building from there on up. But, it took me a lot of iteration, and like I read books like, what do I want to do with my life? And I had no clue. And I constantly just like was, kvetching about like, I hate my job and I hate what I do and blah, blah, blah. But I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why I wasn't happy in doing what I was doing.
So to start out after Oracle, then to be in your own business, to start your own business, even when it was tough, even when it was, not that rewarding financially, I'm sure, knowing that you had a vision of, financial success was always fun. Maybe even through the tough times compared to working for somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was the core observation. So I worked at Oracle for 9 years, which was a really, really long time, more long than I thought I had ever worked there. I came home dissatisfied one day. My wife looks at me and she's like, look, dude, you're going to go start a business. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you're leaving. You're going to start a business. And we're going to buy a house and we're going to have some kids before that happens, but you're going to do this. And I'm like, okay, honey. And she's like, yeah. Like, I'm not going to be married to this bitter old man who wants to clearly do something, but never gets the chance. So you're going to go do this. And, like my wife's clearly the CEO of the family. So I'm like, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I will do this. But, she recognized it in me in a way that I never knew. And so literally 4 years from the moment that she said that, I then left Oracle to go start Alation. But it took me I didn't even realize it. She realized.
Wait, what's the CEO in your family's name?
Her name is Jigna.
Wait, what's that?
Jigna, Jigna.
GNA.
And what's super interesting about her is she's literally the least risk. Like, she is so risk averse. I mean, she's a pediatrician, like, not a career where you're looking for like high risk folks. And so, she's very much the like, got to have the 2.5 kids and the picket fence. And so for her to come and say that to me was a big aha. And then, one thing left to another.
Nobody knows you better than one that loves you most, right? I mean, she knows you, and she knows your history. She knows your family history, right? So she kind of knew you. You grew up in a family. Your parents are probably very positive people, and even within their tough times, right? As they got through tough times, maybe a little disheartening because I've lost everything a couple of times in my career, and a little disheartening, but you still stay optimistic and positive. You're going to get through it because you can. And that positive mentality you probably witnessed and didn't even know that, hey, it wasn't so bad, right?
I mean, that's what was, I think, amazing about my dad. I mean, my dad was kind of this, like, he was a horrible business person, but he was an incredible, like, hacker. Like, he would, even like when he was 70, like, he would be like, oh, I'm going to start a new business where I like, sell diamonds, or I'm going to start a new business, like where I, there was like crazy ideas. And, he was not capable of executing on these ideas at all, but he always had a new idea and always was trying to do something. And that spirit was, I think like that, I don't know that I have that kind of spirit. Like, I really admire him for that, despite the fact that he, I probably am a little bit more rational and capable and thoughtful about, just being logical about, hey, let's take this step by step. But man, that spirit was awesome.
And your dad passed away, or still alive?
Yeah, he passed away in 2018. He
Sorry
passed
to
away
hear,
at 17.
sorry to hear that. Yeah.
Well, he lived a good life. He lived a good life.
Well, again, but
Very
I think
adventurous one.
you probably got a lot of that spirit, that positive, that entrepreneurial spirit in you, and that, but you also got that organizational mind on top of it that really makes you even, even stronger when it comes to growth, building things. So when you did go on your own, tell us about that. When you went on your own, you're going to start this thing. What did Jigna say to support that, and then what got you off and running?
So I gave myself, we had like just around like uh 6 figures of savings at the time, which sounds like a lot of money and probably more money than most entrepreneurs. But in the Bay Area and technology, like you can start burning through that pretty fast when you got a
Yeah,
mortgage and
for
um,
sure.
the like. And so, we sort of said, well, look, this is the amount of money that if you don't like, if it runs out, it runs out. You got to go get a job. And so mathematically, that worked out to something around 15 months. Um, Left the job, had no co-founder. Interestingly, I was a VP at Oracle, which you would think would be a big deal, but was like, a lot of technologists were like, that's like, there was almost like a mark of being a loser because it was like, you're too much of a suit. You kind of don't know anything. And so it was really hard for me to find a co-founder. And I met with 70 different engineers roughly before finding, my co-founder, Venki, who I found on LinkedIn by sending him an email. And in mail, and I sort of said, "Hey, you wrote this book on data quality. Don't you want to talk to me?" And he gave me an hour at a coffee shop. Um, and he happened to want to also start a company, so we teamed up. He brought in another PhD from Google that was his intern, and then I also through Craigslist found this fourth co-founder. But it was a lot of search, and I was sending a ton of emails, and I was like a marketer and a recruiter just to find these people. And that took me 4 months. And then we started working on a prototype um, where ultimately these guys all left their jobs. And we finally founded the company about 9 months after I left Oracle. And so the money and the burn was higher than we had expected. And so if I hadn't within 3 months funded the company or gotten the company funded, I would have had to go back and, find another job.
Wow, that was 2012, 13. What was that?
That was so I left in July 2012, and then we got our funding from our angel round in 2013. And, we really did it off of like a set of mock-ups and the strength of the team. But, like I was in some ways, I had a commercial mind, which was good, and I could pitch the product, which was good. But, these were two PhDs who had pedigrees from Google and Microsoft research, and, you know, um, this other kid was out of Stanford. I mean, this was a really crazy good team. And I just like the thing that actually worked was not so much me, but what was interesting about it was that all I did was find the problem. And I found these three people who looked at each other and were like, oh, I want to work with that guy. And that was ultimately the catalyst to bring it all together. Not like people tell you like, oh, there's this great solution, or, there's this amazing entrepreneur or whatever, but it was really just their belief in each other and the problem that allowed us to make it happen.
Wow, that's awesome. And what was the major problem you found that you guys knew you could solve for in a big way?
So what I thought at the time was that because I worked at Oracle and I saw these companies struggle with their data, like they would buy these systems to process their data. In these cases, I was selling to these big banks, and these big banks would say, oh, well, I want to get these insights out of my data. Like, what are the most profitable loans and who are the most profitable customers? And, how do I think about whether I should do more short CDs versus long CDs? Short being 3 months and long being 12 months. And, which ones of those things do I market more or less? And so those are questions that a banker would have. And to answer those questions, you need to understand a lot about your business. And they would always struggle with getting the data out of their core operational systems. And what I thought was that you would just build this system that would sell to these like people who worked in these banks. And what we realized was that that wasn't quite a right market for us. And so what we did is we started talking to a lot of people. And ultimately what people said is, my real problem is that I have to understand what's inside of these databases, which sounds like the same problem, but it's not exactly that. And so we built all these tools that were not quite the tool that I thought I was going to go build. Um, and that was really a function of just doing a lot of user research and getting the team to meet with a whole bunch of customers.
Wow. And again, then now, when you started, how much money did you have to raise in 2013 to get going?
Our first round was $3 million in 2013. So we raised three, and that was from 14 different investors. And we
And were they,
probably met with like 30-ish or 35, 40-ish who
and
many
were,
of them said no.
were any of them strategic investors too, or no, just financial?
No, at the time, all financial. There were two major investors. The first was a fund called Data Collective. Interestingly, I met the guy who ran that fund, and he said, "Well, you don't have." Before I had any co-founders, and he said, "Well, interesting idea. Go get some co-founders, and if you find them and they're crazy enough to do something with you, then I'll try to fund you." And I think he said that thinking that I would not find co-founders. So, you know, uh, good on me, I guess. And then the second person was a guy named Greg Sands, and Greg ran a fund that was just founded called Costa Noa Ventures. Greg's been on the board of Alation for the last 11 years, and has become one of my best friends, and is frankly one of the best people to have ever been introduced into my life, and has been just a phenomenal backer.
That's awesome. And then, so tell us about building it. Okay, you raise the money. Now you got to build the team. What was your vision for in that you'd have to have within the first year, and then what did you envision 10 years later? Which now you're a little more than 10 years later. But what did you envision first year? Here's the team you have to build, and here's the revenues, or the size of the business could be this X, whatever that is, right? 10 years from now, here's the team we'll have to build, and revenue should get to Y. What does that look like?
So in our case, we were what technologists and often marketers refer to as a category creation play. And so there was no category of a data catalog, which was the first thing that we were trying to build. And so a lot of what we had to do was basically invent the category in people's mind. And so we'd have to educate people that there's a thing, they have problems finding data, which they wouldn't articulate it that way. And that we had a thing that could solve that problem. So we were often educating people about the problem. So for the first 2 years, we literally had zero revenues. We were in stealth. We had no revenues. We were just like talking to customers, building product, iterating, literally we go to a meeting, customers say, "Oh, this is my problem." We'd like write stuff on the back of a napkin and, make some mock-ups, and we'd be like, "Oh, is this what you want?" And they're like, "Yes to that, no to this." And so we would do that a lot. And it took us probably 2.25 years to get to something that we would launch and release. So we launched in 2015. At the time, one of our stealth customers was, a big internet company, eBay, and we had a whole bunch of others that we developed in stealth, but we did it by basically partnering with them to build this product. It then took us another 2 to 3 years to build the category and get people to realize what it was. So our trajectory was something like, I think we started, first year of revenues were like 1.5, then we went to 4, then we went to 10, and then we might have gone to 23. And so the early years were really fast, but it was after a really long gestation period. Like we took a while to sort of to get the product to market.
So first year 2013, or first year 2 years later?
First year of revenues was 2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, and then where are you at today? Where do you think you'd be at? Basically 10, 11 years later, and where are you at today?
No idea where we would be. I mean, I think the first goal was always to sort of replace the paycheck. And I think, as we grew, you obviously have all these ideas and visions of what it could become. But I've always found that, like, for me and my own psychology, I really am just about sort of the next play, which doesn't mean that I don't have vision or don't think it could be bigger. But I think I really try to stay in the moment. So I try not to sort of be like, "Oh, we're going to be $1 billion company" or whatever, because I feel like a lot of that stuff can be damaging when you have setbacks. I love the idea of just sort of psychologically solving the problem that's right in front of me. So I never really thought, "Oh, we were going to have 40% of the Fortune 100 or 600 customers." Like those were fictional ideas. And so I think we built to this, but not because I sort of knew that it was going to necessarily be there, but because we just took like steps and kept on solving problems.
So as a CEO, how did you motivate people? I mean, you go from nobody, no teammates to 600, over 600 today, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. You had to motivate people. Otherwise you'd never be able to grow. You've grown. How did you motivate them? If you didn't have a vision of, hey, we're here, we're going to get here. And when we get here, we're going to need more of you, right? And you're going to be more opportunity for more of you to be more like me. And instead of me in the big paycheck, you're going to get that big paycheck. So what did it take for you to visualize, to get them to visualize where you're going, right?
So I think three things. So the first is I tried to look for people like, you want to try to hunt in target rich environment. And so one of the things that we did was we just looked for people who really understood data and analysis as our early set of employees. And we looked for people with very diverse backgrounds. And so interestingly, a lot of our early employees that were in our technical team weren't actually software engineers. One was a molecular biologist. We had got one guy that was a postdoc in physics, but they all knew data and they all wanted to build something. So one was like hunt in a target rich environment. The second, which was really interesting for us, which was, for me, I'm not a big, like, I want to promise you, like I have this very like Asian philosophy in life, which is like, you can control effort, but you can't control outcomes. Like, crappy things happen to great people all the time. And, really good things happen to bad people all the time. And, you like, the world is not always rational. So I always was like, look, we really have this big problem and you can be there to help solve it. And if we solve it, there's a big prize. But I was really focused on marketing the problem and not the sort of solution to the problem or the outcome that we might obtain. And I'd say the third thing ended up just being like the people themselves, which was you just get this early group of people who are kick-ass people, and those people end up attracting other great people. And so, now that can work in the other direction too. Like if you get one bad apple, it can actually spawn, what Steve Jobs called the bozo explosion. Like you hire one bozo and that person will hire three more bozos and there's another bozo. And so, like you definitely want to guard against the bozos, but I think we did a really good job early of hiring great people. So that was how I did it. Not always like other people do it differently, but that was my way.
Wow, that's a great way to say it. I have bluntly a no dickhead rule. In all my businesses,
Totally.
my dad used that term as growing up as the rough world we grew up in, and when I probably 20 years in before I figured out after really running my business based on 80-20 rule that when I saw issues and challenges that customers didn't pay me, that treated my teammates bad or whatever, or even employees that just weren't the right fit culturally, right? It was simply, you could just look and say, is that person a good person or not? And if they weren't, right, we would just say that they're not a fit, whether it's a customer, a vendor, or a teammate. I think when you can look at your business that way, your life that way, boy, it gets a heck of a lot easier, right? So I like that bozo explosion that you said that Steve Jobs used. That's a great way to look at that, right?
Yeah, the hard thing about dickheads or bozos is that they don't show up like that.
No, that's right.
Right? They show up as like really, cool guys and gals who are just like trying to make the team go. And, like you kind of, they say all the right things. And then when you get into it, it's like, no, they're actually pretty self-motivated and they actually like think their opinions are better than everybody else's and they don't really listen. But it's hard to discover that. And it's really hard to discover that in an interview process because often these people are really good at interviewing. So you have to dig.
Yeah. So we, what I found is what worked for me the last 15 years, we've gotten much stronger and really manage our business by our core values, right? Using our core values to hire by, to fire by, to motivate by, right? And I think for us, that's worked well. Have you got some strong core values that you use, or is it just culturally you get by, or what?
No, we do. We have, we have a vision statement that kind of guides what we do, and that's to empower curiosity and rationality. And so that's that's a big statement.
Hold on. I like that. Empower curiosity.
It's to empower a curious and rational world, and which sounds like literally to empower a curious and rational world. So that gets back to my economics days, like rational thinking and all of that. But I believe in that. Like I believe that you think about humanity and progress, I mean, most of the progress has been made on the back of science and rational thinking and capitalism and people's own initiative. And so if you can empower more people to like really see the world around them, that's a really powerful thing to do. And so that is sort of the true North vision. And then we've got 4 value statements. One of them is to build for the long term. Another one is to move the ball. Another one is to listen like you're wrong. And then the last one is to measure yourself through customer impact. Because, all of us serve somebody. And, even if you're like in HR, you're serving our employees, they're your customer. And so how do you think about that impact that you have?
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So I'm a lot slower than you, and I talk fast, and people don't catch what I say either. So build for the long term.
Yep.
Move the ball.
Yep.
What's the next one?
Listen like you're wrong.
I like that. That's tough for people to do, and myself included. Listen like you're wrong.
Which, what's data for if not for actually, you don't need data if all you're going to do is walk around and say, oh, I'm right all the time.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Okay. The fourth one
is measure yourself through customer impact.
Sure. I love it. Yeah, that says so much. And in your industry, that really, I think, really describes who you are in your business, your industry, and those values are perfect for that. Yeah, because through data, you're going to constantly prove that what you've been thinking might not be exactly right. Right? The customers you think are your best customers might not be. The solutions you think are the best solutions might not be what they even need or they're asking for. Right? If you're not doing the work that you do every day, that's really cool. When you think about so what's success to you? Like, so 2024, over 600 teammates. What type of revenues you guys do now?
We're over 150 million. We in recurring revenues. We're success. Like, I'm going to give you an answer that like isn't going to sound like a real answer, but to me, success is doing it the right way. Like I think one person who, CEO who's a friend and a mentor, just said to me, like, the thing about you is that, you just show up every day. And I think as long as I sort of show up every day, treat people well, lay it out on the field, try to help the people that I'm trying to help, make the best decisions I possibly can, and stay true to that, like, and not be frantic or compromise my values in the moment where stuff's going wrong, treat people badly when stuff's going wrong. Like, that to me is success. Like, I really don't, and this is a very Asian thing, but I really don't want to, the outcome's the outcome. Like, maybe I'm a billionaire, maybe I'm worth 0 at the end of the day. I don't like whatever. But I do, but I feel like if I can just like show up every day and just treat people well and live my values and do it right, that's what I'm trying to do.
I love it. It's awesome. Man. It just says so much, right? Doing it the right way, and everything. But it summarizes many things below that. Treat people like you want to be treated, right? Show up every day, work hard, and people will follow that. Follow that path. So I love it. You're not a leader unless people want to follow you, right? I mean, so many people call themselves a leader, even a CEO or whatever you might be, a president, whatever it might be. But if people aren't willing to follow you on a daily basis because they love what you're about, you're probably not really a leader. If you don't inspire people to do things they wouldn't do otherwise, right? You're really not a leader. And for you to be able to grow from where you started to where you are today, that took a lot of people had to follow you, believing that you had a great idea, that you had a great business and something they wanted to be part of. So, congratulations on great leadership, because you definitely got it. When you think about that, the culture, your servant mentality, I go back to, what I've learned in my faith, that if I really just live my life like I think God wants me to, it's serving others at the highest level. It's serving others before myself, and it's serving others with differentiation and value, right? I feel like when we do that well in life, we have a great life. When we do that well in business, we have a great business because customers want to be served by somebody that really is passionate about serving them. It's like you go out to eat at a restaurant and food could be great, but if the service stinks, you might not be coming back. I think it should be that way. In our businesses, if you as a leader don't show that you're willing to serve your teammates before yourself and your customers before yourself, you're probably not going to be able to continue to grow at the pace you've grown at.
No question. I think people understand, maybe not always and not in the short term, but I think generally people understand people that are authentic, and generally people understand people who are out for themselves versus out for other people. And like that's not true always, but I think it's true for the people that I want to surround myself with, and it's served me well for sure.
Yeah, and when you think about faith, are you Hindu, or what's your faith?
I grew up in a Hindu household. I wouldn't call myself very religious, but I would say if I did have to pick a religion, it's probably Buddhism. There's aspects of Hinduism too. Like, I mean, there's this, one of the things that my mom reads the Gita, which is more of philosophy text than it is a religious text. I'd argue, and she'd argue, and I think that's been super influential in my life. And all of it is really about just like, what is your duty in life and what's right action and how do you think about making the right decisions? And, it's very much that philosophy of like, tie yourself to the, intention and the action, not to the outcome. And I like, that to me has been very, transformational. And I think also you have to manage your psychology in a lot of different ways. And I think faith, or at least some fundamental belief system, helps us all do that, because in every life, like stuff's going to go right and stuff's going to go wrong. And you have to know how to deal with that. And I think so much of entrepreneurship is about being strong and tenacious and being gritty in the face of adversity.
Gritty is a great word. I love the word gritty because I believe my best teammates, my best leaders, and I think that a lot of my life has been a gift that I've had, been through some tough times. And I think that, we're not excited about tough times when they come, but when you get through them and you realize the lessons you learn, it's a beautiful thing. I think God does that to us to say, okay, you're not so special, dude. You got some work to do, and here's some lessons you can take away from this, right? If you try to listen, whenever, faith or no faith, right? If you have the humility to try and say, okay, what did I do wrong, right? Just what did I do wrong? If you ask yourself that question, you're probably going to find some answers over time, especially if it's something big that you really hurt you, right?
Yeah.
So when I was in India for about over a month, about 35 or 40 days, and for some treatments for my son and my late wife at the time, and just loved it. I just love the people. We're in oh gosh, oh, it's a big city there. Now I'm thinking, I just have a brain fart. But anyway, I'm there for 35, 40 days, and I met people at all levels of wealth, from CEOs that I reached out to, from my YPO network to my driver and his family and his community. And man, I felt there's so much love there. It's amazing. Whether it's Buddhism or they're Hinduism, whatever. Those space really, in my opinion, are surrounded by lots of love and lots of family. No matter what, how much money the person's got, man, family is everything. And so I saw that, and I love the culture in India. So.
Yeah, it's a great part of it's a huge part of me. And as a first generation kid, you sort of grow up with two cultures, right? I mean, you grow up here, but then your parents are like sort of raising you as they might do an Indian kid in the US. And there was much less of sort of an Indian diaspora, when I was growing up than there is now. And so you find, you just didn't have as many Indian restaurants. You didn't have as many people who were, that looked like you. And so it was it was definitely, there was that was a lot. I described a lot of who I am. And I show up as an American, and I am fundamentally an American, but it definitely influenced a lot of who I am and how I think.
What's the technology hub there? What's the city that's always growing lately? And
Bangalore.
Bangalore. That's where I was.
Is that where you were?
Bangalore for 35 to 40 days. Yeah. And my son who had minor cerebral palsy is a different man today because the treatments he received there.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
to a great Indian scientist that's there that did. I I'm still in touch with them today because him and a couple of his doctors because they're amazing people. But anyway, yeah. So so Chris, what do you got on this? I mean, my brain's going nuts here because Satyan's got me thinking about a lot of stuff now. How
Oh,
about you?
this was incredible, man. I could, I'm gonna respect Satyan's time, but I have at least 30 questions I would love to ask him. Um, so Satyan, hypothetical question for you. Let's say we're talking to an Oxford-trained economist who let's say has access to around 40% of Fortune 100's data. Would they have any fun things on their radar for the short and medium terms?
Fun things on my radar, man. Fun things with regards to those businesses and what they're
Well,
up.
like the economy as a whole, or the
Oh,
world's economy as a whole.
I think, I mean, I'm not going to say anything revolutionary here, but I do think that AI is going to be slower to adopt. Like, I think it's going to be way slower than I think there'll be there's this thing called the Gartner hype cycle. Stuff is like, it's like, oh, there's this peak of inflated expectations. I think we're maybe even starting to pass that, but I think it's going to be pretty magical and it's going to be super fun.
Yeah,
Um, I think there's a lot of interesting, cool things going on in Asia. That market in general is just so dynamic, and there's so many different people who are seeing the world in different ways. And every job is going to become a data job, which is like super exciting for me because,
mhm,
if you
Yeah.
don't understand data and how to interpret it, you're going to be in a population of people that are just taking orders rather than making orders. And, the most powerful people are the ones that are, making the orders.
absolutely. And I think you have such a unique perspective on this particular moment in time because you're like a data specialist. I don't want to say data hoarder, but you're like, super tuned in on data, and you're an Oxford trained economist. So do you have a strong perspective on how these, likely your data trained LLMs will impact the global economy over the next, 1 to 5 years, the job market especially?
Yeah, I think that a lot of, um, so I mean, so there's a lot of stuff these LLMs are both very smart and very stupid. Um, Very smart because they can come up with things that sound very human. Very stupid because sometimes they just do it completely wrong, and it's somewhat unpredictable when they get things wrong. Um, and so there's a lot of tasks in content creation that are absolutely going to be accelerated. Content summarization, repeating knowledge that is well known, well documented. I've got a buddy who's basically actually building an AI company where they're billing these AI based nurses out on an hourly basis. So there are some very interesting use cases where jobs that otherwise were hard to do, hard to find people for, I think a lot of those jobs are going to start getting supplemented. But I think there's also this like problem, which I think is going to really be empowering to humans, which is still recognizing truth. And so I think there's going to be this interesting play where the AI works, but it doesn't quite work as it is intended. And so it's going to fund a new set of jobs and a new set of capabilities, which I think is going to be super interesting. So I think these markets are really complicated and dynamic. And there's a lot of people who are like, oh, the robots are going to take over the world and we're all going to be out of work. And I, I, I think there's lots of plays in this game to get to a final answer, and the economics of this are going to be playing out over years.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. One final question. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was just dying to ask that. You interviewed over 70 folks to find a co-founder. Do you have, obviously finding a co-founder is a huge component of your success. Any tips or tricks or strategies to find a good co-founder or multiple co-founders?
There's a few for sure. I think you want to find people who are um, so this guy who's one of our angel investors and who's a pretty well known tech guy called Naval Ravikant, like basically said, you want to find people who are hungry, humble, and smart. because the opposite of that is always really bad. Like you don't want somebody who's lazy, arrogant, and stupid. That would be those are tough. Those are tough attributes to be around. I think those are all very true. I also think that you want to find people who you fit with and are really true to you. People aren't resumes. And I think getting to know somebody's work style, understanding how they work, what their dreams and aspirations are, why they're doing what they do. Can you team with them? Can they operate as a part of a team? Those are, I think really important things. So spending the time to break bread with them and being really intellectually honest about those spidey senses that you have. I think often, I hear about co-founding relationships that go bad. And the ones that go bad are often ones where they're like, I knew this thing was wrong with this person, but I just didn't pay attention to it. Now that might be Monday morning quarterbacking, so you have to be careful about that. But it's also the case that you often know what the problems are going to be and sometimes aren't true to yourself. And so that part I think is pretty important too, and maybe the hardest to recognize.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, final question. Sorry, I thought of another one I was dying to ask you. So it seems like these large language models are kind of plateauing. You're super deep in the data space, like training a lot of these models, I'm sure. Are we just in the eye of the storm and it's going to keep exploding in functionality and ability after this, or is this kind of the end of the large language models ability?
I think that's so I think we're going to know a lot when GPT-5 gets released and figuring out how different GPT-5 was from its predecessor. And that date seems to be getting pushed out. And then, the question is, how different will it truly be? So I think it is true that it seems like there might be some plateauing that's happening, but it's hard to know and hard to tell until we actually see the next versions of these things. I would also say though that conversely, many of these models, like even like GPT 3.5, like there are a lot of things that we could do with these things that we still aren't doing. So even, we haven't really adopted these things at scale. And so even the current version of the model, maybe that absorption into, like, there's the theoretical things you can do with the model, and then there's the actual things that people are doing with the model. And that gap is, I think, very big. And so I think there's still a lot of mileage of all of the things that we can do with these models, which will still take years to absorb. I mean, it's almost like the internet. The internet showed up in 1999, in the late 90s, but it wasn't until even arguably today that we're getting the full returns from that technology. And I think that's true for this too.
Yeah, I'm thinking the internet might be around for a while. I'm thinking it's something that's going to work out.
Feel like it. Maybe a few more weeks.
Awesome. Thank you, Satyen. That was incredible.
And so Chris, what I got, really a few things I got to kick out. I love the Steve Jobs thing, right? The Bozo explosion, right? And boy, you see this often, right? When you get a person that hires when you find somebody that in your business that is selfless, and they hire people that may be stronger than them, even though they're in a leadership position, they're hiring people that are smarter and stronger than them. You got somebody that you want for the long haul, because they're not in fear of making your business better with a mind that might be better than theirs. It might work for them, right? And then you've got people that you hire that you think are the right people, but they won't hire anybody that might have a little more intelligence to them in any way, right? And boy, that's the Bozo effect right there, because boy, your business doesn't have a chance if you hire a couple of those, because they're going to undermine your ability to find great people. So I love that one. And then think of, every business is a data business today. If we're not harvesting data, then we shouldn't be a business, because that's what's going to drive our success, or if lack of that is going to drive our failure in the future. So I love that. And, and asking yourself the question, and as I'm sure, Satyen does often, is, what's that data telling us, right? What's that data, what is it telling us? And from basic data to very using big technology data, we've got to continually ask that question.
Yeah, Gary, I had if your wife says start a business, you start that damn business.
Especially if she's a powerful CEO of your family.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Satyen, where can our audience find out more about you, everything you guys are working on?
You can always come to alation.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn for the most part. It's Satyen Sangani, and you can just look me up. And then I also have a podcast called Data Radicals, where I talk to people who are trying to do amazing and interesting things with data, or thinking about the world and interesting in different ways. Often you have journalists or economists or leaders or data people. So that's also a ton of fun. And you can just find that on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast content.
It's called Data Radicals.
Data Radicals. That's right.
I love it. I love it. Well, Satyen, you're awesome, man. I love what you're doing, and this entrepreneurial dream that you're exposing to you and your team and your family is amazing. Lastly, I'm going to start listening like I'm wrong, and my family, my fiance,
only to your wife. Oh yeah, only to your fiance.
Well, no, I'm telling you, I'm going to practice that more, because I think I don't do a good job of that. But otherwise, your story is inspiration to me and anybody listening for sure. If you come to Chicago sometime, or Naples, Florida in the wintertime, look me up. I'd love to catch lunch with you. And if I come to San Francisco, I'm going to be hunting you down too. Okay.
That would be awesome. I would look forward to it, and right back at you. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot. And also I'm gonna probably plug my son into you if I could, and get a conversation, because I think we can do some things here. If you look at small businesses like ours as something that you want to help, that I think you could help us a lot. So,
sounds great. Would love to.
Awesome. So nice to meet you. Thanks for everything. What a great episode of Ditch Digger CEO. Satyen, you're a champion in the world, and we're blessed to have you today. So thank you so much. Until next time, see ya.